Living with Dying, up next on Carpe Diem. Hello everyone and welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm your host, Jon Vazquez. Now today we'll be discussing living with dying, the difficult task of knowing you have an incurable illness while still maintaining a normal lifestyle. Although it's a difficult subject to openly discuss, it is still something that we should try to understand and find the best way to approach if it ever hits close to home. Now here to talk about the importance of support, options, and the best way to open a line of communication between you and a loved one in a similar situation is registered nurse Danielle Lutz. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Danielle, can you give us a little bit of a background of what you do and what you deal with as a nurse?
Well, I've been a nurse since 1991, and I've dealt with all sorts of patients, oncology patients, patients living with terminal illnesses, surgical patients who they don't know what they're expecting, and all different patients. And going into oncology, I've seen in personal and professional life, I've dealt with those types of patients who are dealing with terminal illness every day.
Now, I'm sure terminal illness is a difficult thing to deal with as a patient and even for the family. And it's difficult to talk about, you know?
Absolutely.
What are some good ways that people who have a family member who are dealing with a terminal illness, so what's a good way that they can listen to what the patient is saying?
Well, listening is so hard for family members and nurses and doctors to do, because sometimes we want to just interact right away, give our feedback, but we really need to have like a nice sit down when you're going to open up this discussion and talk about it, and you want to have a nice non-destructive atmosphere, quiet, you want to remain focused. You don't want to interrupt the patient when they're starting to talk to you, because you're there to listen. Keep focus, remain calm. If they start to get upset, lend them a hand, give them a hug, watch their nonverbal, verbal cues to see, if they're really ready to open up and talk to you.
Now, I'm certain there are so many different emotions going on inside of a patient when they're dealing with this. What are some of the stages that you've encountered and that you've seen patients go through when they're dealing with the terminal illness?
In the professional field, we say that there's normally 5 stages that patients go through. And the first stage is denial, where they're just not believing their diagnosis. They want the physician to, run more tests, anything like that. They're going to go for a second opinion. The next emotion or phase or stage that most people go through is anger. And anger is very difficult because it's hard on the caretaker, it's hard on the professional staff as well, because that's when the patient may start to lash out. And we just have to have patience and let them be angry, because they're trying to deal with a difficult situation. And another phase or stage is bargaining. And bargaining is when the patient may turn to God in prayer and wonder whether or not, ask God, if I'm do better in life, will you give me hope, and maybe I could live longer. Or they'll bargain with their doctor, I just need to live to see my kids graduate, or I want to see my daughter have a baby, or something like that. And then the next thing is depression, and that's really difficult too, because that's when the patient tends to isolate themselves and they don't want to talk about things, and you just really need to give them time, because it's okay for them to isolate themselves a little bit, but you do need to still check on them and make sure that they are okay. You don't want them to isolate themselves completely. And the last stage is acceptance, is when they're accepting their illness and they want to go forth with treatment, or they've come to terms with it. They want to move on in life and make plans for the future, whether it's dying or how they will live going forward with the diagnosis.
Now, are there patients that don't necessarily get through all these stages? Do they get stuck in one certain stage?
Absolutely. There's patients where they go through every single phase. There might be a patient who goes through 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. There's no rhyme or reason with the 5 stages. It's just normal behavior for patients to go through.
Now, how does a family member open up that line of communication between them and their loved one? Because I know that some people don't necessarily, this is a private matter and they don't want to talk about that. It's so personal and dark and tragic to them.
Right. So when you're trying to talk to the patient, you don't want to ask yes/no questions, because that just ends the line of communication. You want to try to open up with, like, what are you feeling today? Or what are your goals in life? Just try to open up some kind of communication, and don't just go for those, yes/no questions, because they're just going to answer the yes/no, and they're not going to continue to communicate. So it's real important.
Now, for those that are looking for support and looking for solace, how can they get that? How can they achieve that?
Well, there's many support groups that are out there. There's online support groups. There's support groups within your healthcare where you're being treated. Normally, most hospitals have patient education centers where they can go and they can get all kinds of information with local community support groups. There's a great online Patient Like Us support group where you can pretty much type in there your diagnosis and communicate with patients that have the same diagnosis as you, and look at their treatments, look and see what they're going through, talk to them, because they're an outsider. They don't know you, and sometimes that may be very good.
Could someone even look towards their doctor to find support?
Absolutely. You can also go to your doctor. Sometimes your doctor or nurse can set you up with one of their patients in their office to let them know, what road they're going down, and they could kind of discuss how they're feeling, the other patient that's going through the same diagnosis as them.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And it's no surprise that this subject hits so many of us close to home, including myself. But for one woman, an initial life expectancy of 5 years has turned into 13 years of positivity and growth. Take a look.
She just was in pain. She had gotten a bruise and it just didn't go away.
I had a really bad sinus infection. After the antibiotics had gone through and I could breathe from the sinus infection, my body just hurt from head to toe. My name is Larusso MacGowan, and I was diagnosed with scleroderma in 2004. At the time, I had gone to the doctor's office to see what the blood work was, and he told me that, well, you've come back with this SCL70 antibody, and never hearing about this before, asked what it was, and he said, you have scleroderma.
So scleroderma is an autoimmune connective tissue disease where there's dysregulation of your immune system and dysregulation of how much collagen is in your skin, so that you get poor circulation to your hands and feet, so-called Raynaud's phenomenon, so usually is the starting symptom, and then tight skin, which can affect any place from the face to the toes, and then sometimes your internal organs, such as your lungs, your heart, or your kidneys, can also be attacked by excessive amounts of collagen and inflammation.
Still having no idea what it was, I'd never heard of it before. I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, if this was the 1950s, you'd be dead in 5 years. And of course, after you hear something like that, I don't really remember too much of what he said after that, but he said that it was something that did not have a cure, but just because it didn't have a cure didn't mean it was untreatable.
At the moment, we're still stuck with trying to find the best treatments for the various complications, such as high blood pressure, pulmonary artery hypertension, tight skin, and stiff lungs. One would hope that you might discover an immune mediating agent which would shut the whole process off and the disease would resolve. But we're not there yet unless we go to this massive stem cell or bone marrow transplant that requires a lot of chemotherapy with the associated risks.
Still a little overwhelmed. I remember leaving the doctor's office and crying the whole way home and thinking, how do I tell my husband that I have scleroderma, and not even knowing quite what it was myself and what the outcome was.
At the beginning, Lisa took it very hard. She was a little bit of a basket case. She's better now, but she was a basket case at the beginning. And we just had a daughter, so, she was a year old. And it was hard. It was hard, keeping up the, facade of being strong when, everything's falling around. Because, they say they gave her a, 5-year bell curve, you never know what's going to happen. I might have 5 years with her. I might have less. I have more. It's like throwing, you're playing dice. You never know what you're going to get. So it was difficult at the beginning.
Along with any person who is told by a doctor, you have 5 years to live, I did go through a really rough patch of depression. When you have a toddler and you're trying to get her dressed in the morning and you have difficulty with your hands. It's frustrating. There's many times in my life where I felt very useless and just didn't know if I want to be here anymore. And if this was just not fair.
Switch. There's Lisa.
Hi.
Like close up with no background light. Okay.
Hi Joyce. How are you? Hi Lori. Hi Frank.
Rangers t-shirt.
Yes, Stanley Cup champions. Thank you. And Frank, they are a hockey team.
Okay. You thought they were a basketball team, but that's okay.
My husband, who just would get so upset when I would get upset, he kept guaranteeing that I was going to see my daughter grow up, and I just had such a will to do that, and knowing that when I got diagnosed, my daughter had just celebrated her first birthday, I was dead set on making sure that I was going to enjoy every birthday from then on end and just really enjoy my life. And I'm happy to say in less than a month, I'm going to be celebrating my daughter's 13th birthday with her. And it just is such an incredible feeling. And even though this absolutely horrible illness has changed my life in ways that I would never ever want or wish or imagine or wish on my worst enemy. I really have a positive prognosis that if I keep fighting and keep vigilant to make sure that I keep up and listen to my medical team, that I can beat the odds. And though, most scleroderma patients don't really last 20 years or more, I'm hoping to make sure that I'm going to beat the odds for that. And, I'm hoping to be around for not only my daughter's 13th birthday, but her 18th birthday and her 28th birthday and 38th birthday. And I'm going to hang on as long as I can. The one thing I think I've learned over the past 11 years is that it's not personal. It's just something that's happened, and it's the cards that I've been dealt. So I've got to buck up and play the best hand that I can. And the hardest thing for me is I always like to picture where I'd be in 5 or 10 years from now, and I truly don't care about that anymore, because if anything, I've learned how to live in the moment, and it was something I always thought I did, was live for now, and I never really did. Now I really enjoy every aspect of my life. I enjoy spending time with my daughter. I enjoy when I could help volunteer and help out my husband's fire department or my church or anyone, or giving some words of encouragement. I'm happy that I'm still here, and I'm still here.
And joining us right now is Lisa MacGowan. Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, your story is an absolutely incredible story. You've gone through so much. You know, since the taping, what has changed for you in life? What has life been like for you?
Well, the taping was incredible because there were so many people in my life who had quite no idea of what I had gone through, or you know, what I'm still going through, and it was quite the eye-opener for them. It's you know, hard when people look at you and you don't look handicapped in their eyes. So I think the hardest part was trying to explain, you know, what my daily struggles were, and this kind of captured that.
Do you feel like have you discovered anything about yourself?
Well, I'm a lot stronger than I originally thought I was. You know, when someone tells you originally, you know, your prognosis is, you know, 5 years, or we don't quite know what's going to happen, and, you know, I had an infant at the time, really shakes your world. And, you know, for me, the hard part is to, you know, get to the acceptance part of this is my life and this is where I'm at, and it's all good.
Do you feel like you've reached that point?
Oh, definitely, definitely. It's taken me quite a while. You know, there was some deep, dark depression time where I didn't want to even get out of bed. And, you know, it's now I keep going, and I try to look for the bright side of things and keep a positive attitude. You know, watching my daughter, you know, sharing her 13th birthday with her was just an incredible feeling.
Now, when you shared your story and when you shared the video to your family and your friends, what was the reaction that you got out of them? Were you hesitant in showing them?
No, not at all. And what it was it was so hard for them to explain to other people what I had, that this was a great vehicle for them also. So it's, I think, you know, it's, everybody hears about cancer, and everybody hears about, you know, other diseases and symptoms of things that people go through, and that it's much more common. And scleroderma, I mean, I know until I got diagnosed, I had never even heard of it, had no idea what it was. So it's a good eye-opener for people to see what's out there and why funding and research is so important.
Very important.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned in the video, you know, talking about your daughter, and you mentioned it a little earlier, how difficult it was to speak about this matter to your daughter, and you actually kept it hidden from her, you know?
Oh, for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, the best thing about being a kid is, you know, having no cares in the world. So the last thing that I wanted for her was for her to feel that she had to change her life or what she was doing because her mother was ill.
Were you ever afraid that she would have to grow up without a mother?
Yes, yes, I was very afraid. And so, you know, I've made precautions for that. And, you know, my husband was incredible. He said, that's not going to happen. And he was so positive, and having a positive support system like that is just priceless.
Do you think having her understand what this is, is helping you get through it?
Yes, because I held it back from her for so long that, now she's the most helpful and compassionate kid in the 7th grade.
That's a beautiful thing. Does she have questions for you when you showed her the video and when you explained this to her, this disease that you have?
I think her biggest question, and I could just see it in her face, was, am I going to get this? And, what I had to explain to her, it's an autoimmune disorder, so they don't really know what causes it, but the one thing that they know for sure, that it's not a hereditary thing. So it's not that, my nieces and nephews or my daughter really have to worry about it. It's a very rare, and they're really not quite sure how it picks who it picks. But it's the one thing for sure is that it's not a hereditary thing. So, I assured her that it's not something she would have to worry about.
Now, something that amazes me about you and your story is how positive you've definitely stayed throughout this whole journey that you've gone through.
Well, not always. I have my bad days, but I try to make it days. So if I'm having a bad day, I always go to bed at night and say, tomorrow's going to be better. And I try not to take any struggles I had that day, physically, issues I've had, and the next day try to start fresh.
Is there anybody or anything that has kept you, so positive? Because I noticed you mentioned, faith and religion and how you kind of use that as an outlet.
Yes, I have a great support group through my church, which is wonderful. I've just recently joined a scleroderma support group. Very few people, since it's so rare. So I drive about an hour, but I've met people who, have had the disease and are going through what I'm going through. So it's comforting, and it's nice to have somebody to bond with and talk to.
Was it difficult to find that somebody or the support group?
It was very difficult because it's so rare. And, when you're going through depression and you start looking for things and everything you see is negative, I kind of stepped back for a few years, and once I got to a point where I thought I was getting healthier, I wanted to help other people and not only talk about what I've gone through, but see what they've gone through. And knowledge is power. So if I can help someone through their rough time and make it better than my rough time was, I'd love to do that.
Do you feel like having someone to kind of walk through the fire with has really helped you, and does it help other people?
Oh, yes. I mean, knowing that you're not alone is a great feeling, and knowing that people are there to support you, and when they're there when you have your good times and you're bad, it's amazing. It's I was lucky enough. I just had my 19th wedding anniversary this week, and it's incredible, that what's gone on, especially for me, a good portion of that time, and what my husband's gone through, and I'm just so thankful. It's amazing feeling to have somebody who's there for you and supporting you, and though they may not know what you're going through, they'll take you in good and bad.
Do you feel as though your husband has definitely helped you throughout this entire process?
Oh, I don't think I could have survived without him. So.
Do you feel, before you were diagnosed, did you know about this disease? Or
I had
were you familiar?
no idea. And, I did pharmaceutical marketing prior to that. And I was dealing with, horrible things and working with different symposiums with different doctors and medical staff, and had never even heard about it prior to my diagnosis.
Now knowing what you've gone through, go back and let's see, what would you tell yourself, maybe 13 years ago when you didn't have any idea what this disease was? What advice would you give yourself?
I guess the best advice I can give myself is that, cut yourself a break, because I was I was my own worst enemy. So I was hardest on myself with why I was physically unable to do things, why I had to stop working, and that this isn't personal. I took it very personal in the beginning, that why was I singled out to, be the one who gets scleroderma. So it was...
this is a tough question to think about.
Yeah, and it's, the acceptance of that it's just not personal. It's just something that happened, and now that it's happened, I'm going to deal with it in the best way possible and keep moving forward, and that I'm, I guess my best line is I'm still here. So I'm still here, and I'm not in a wheelchair, and I'm going to try to keep going as long as I can.
What are you looking forward to in the future?
Well, I'm looking forward to, now that my daughter's had her 13th birthday, she's going to be going into 8th grade and then high school and hopefully college, and I want to be around to see all that. So I'm going to try to keep myself as healthy as possible and, listen to my doctors and my medical team and try to remain positive, because there's no better medicine than a positive attitude. They can give me all the drugs in the world, but if I'm not positive and wanting to move on, it's just not going to happen.
Keeping a good outlook on things.
You really need to. It's singly the most important thing.
Well, Lisa, I want to thank you so much for coming to Carpe Diem. Absolutely incredible story. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And I wish you nothing but the best on your future prognosis. That wraps up this edition of Carpe Diem. For more information on this or any other episode of Carpe Diem, please write to us at the email address on your screen, carpediem@montclair.edu, or you can call us at 973-655-5158. Until next time, I'm Jon Vazquez. Thank you for watching.